Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. It's Whiskey's favorite time of the year, Spooktober. So rinse off your knives and join us for Whiskey's Killer Kinos. In tonight's episode, we will be discussing Poltergeist, which celebrated its 40th anniversary this year. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead. Hello, listeners, and welcome to, Whiskey's favorite month of the year.
Welcome to spooky time, everybody. It's that time of year where I finally get to talk about what I like talking about, because I've been good this year. So far, I think this is the first horror movie we've talked about all year. So,
is it?
Very excited.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. You're right, it is.
Like I said, I was trying to be good about branching out into other genres, and I believe, at least for the ones we have planned, these two are the only, horror, quote-unquote, movies we've got set up. So, being good, but very excited. As you said, this is my favorite time of year, and this is a movie that I was surprised you'd never seen before.
I had not seen this movie before, and it's one that I wanted to see for a while. So that's kind of why I threw it on the list. I'm like, oh, what a perfect excuse to finally watch it. For those of you who haven't seen the title yet, this episode we're going to be discussing the 1982 horror classic Poltergeist.
Woo!
So,
all right, so T, what are you drinking?
Okay, so I am super lazy. I went to the liquor store to go and make a cocktail, and I found, those little they always have those little mini bottles for you to try. Of a gin called Poltergeist. It's Poltergeist gin. So I am having gin.
That's actually impressive.
That's called Poltergeist.
I don't even like gin, but that's cool.
I don't either.
Try that
that's why I got the mini bottle. I'm doing this for the show.
Now I want to try that gin just because of the name. You're not the only one being lazy on it. So partly there's so many things you could drink this time of year, but because of the setting and because of kind of the tone and mood and atmosphere of this movie, I thought of doing something a little bit more suburban. So I went with a beer. I think this time of year is kind of a good beer season, or cider or whiskey or anything kind of more warm tasting, if that makes any sense. I wanted to do Sam Adams Oktoberfest, but all I had time to do before we recorded was go to the grocery store, and my local grocery store apparently sucks because all they had was regular Sam Adams. But I'm okay with that. For any of you who don't know, the two of us went to Boston for college, and this is a beer that if you like beer, it's it's your civic duty to drink it.
Yeah, it's kind of like everybody there has at least, or it's usually the go-to. I don't want to say cheap beer, but it's the go-to beer.
Yeah, I'd say it's more mid-priced, but the cool thing about it is it actually lives up to its expectation. I actually think it's pretty good, and I haven't had it in forever because when I lived there, it was all the time, Sam Adams, but I don't know the last time I've had it. Maybe it's been years. So I just figured I'd go have a nostalgia trip this episode with a nice beer. Reminds me of the opening of this movie with all the guys huddled around the crappy TV.
Yeah, I almost went with cider for that very reason. I'm glad I found that at the last minute.
Right, so, and I already had a sip. Ooh, the memories, they're flooding back.
They're flooding back all the poor decisions you made. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right? Led me here, so I'm happy about them, right? So, yeah, let's finally talk about this movie. So, I'm curious what you think.
So, first, before we do that, let's get into the basics. So,
yes.
This movie is directed by Tobe Hooper, who you probably know from his Texas Chainsaw Massacre days.
Yep, I was curious if you were going to get that in your research, so I'm very... And, I'm going to let you finish, Taylor, but...
Okay.
No,
okay.
But the guy, everyone always thinks of him as the Texas Chainsaw guy, but he went on to make a bunch of movies, and this one is kind of special for me because it's cool that he was working with Spielberg.
Yeah.
Which I know you're going to get into with everyone who was involved in stuff. But
Right.
it's kind of cool how, again, he's known for this intense, scary, everyone thinks is like really gory movie. And then he did this kind of borderline family friendly horror movie with Spielberg and Industrial Lights and Magic. And all these people were always talking about from this era of filmmaking that did Star Wars and all this stuff. So it's cool. Like this, I always love to throw in, like, if anyone talks about Tobe Hooper and they don't know that he directed this movie, I like to be like, hey, I bet you saw a Tobe Hooper film when you were a lot younger than you realize.
You didn't.
But anyway,
even
Taylor,
know.
continue.
Oh my God. Okay. So the music was done by the very talented Jerry Goldsmith. He's done one of my favorite movie scores of all time. He did the score for the movie Rudy. I actually have that on vinyl. I love that soundtrack. And this score,
this music, I forgot how good this music was. And one thing I'll say going into this, with horror movies, you can't really call a lot of them wholesome. But this one feels very wholesome, and a lot of that has to do with this music and the kind of feeling it brings on. And it's interesting because I was also another one of your favorites I was thinking about while watching this that came out slightly before was the Amityville Horror. And the way they did the music in that one was like kind of creepy children singing.
I actually kind of like that one, though. I kind of like both.
I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad. Again, like this movie has a very wholesome vibe to it. And the interesting thing is if you played the score for this movie to someone out of context, I don't think that they would guess that it was even in a horror movie.
Right.
Because it's very nice and quaint and comforting sounding.
Yeah.
And it works really well with kind of the story and also like what's going on, because it's about this like very mundane neighborhood being overtaken by this malevolent paranormal force. And it juxtaposes like the scary stuff happening with this like really nice happy music.
Yeah.
And I never noticed it before, but watching it again for this show, I was like, wow, this music fits really well. And strangely, because if you really pay attention to how it sounds, it really doesn't, you wouldn't think it would fit well with this movie.
Right. Yeah, so the score in this movie is fantastic. The cinematography was done by Matthew F. Leonette. It was written by Steven Spielberg, Michael Grays, and Mark Victor. Special effects, as you said, were done by Industrial Light and Magic, and it was produced by Steven Spielberg and Frank Marshall. Now let's get into the numbers. This had a budget of $10.7 million, and it had a box office draw of $121.7 million. This was the highest grossing horror film of 1982 and the 8th highest grossing film of the year. Let's get into accolades really quick. So it was nominated for 3 Academy Awards for original score, sound effects, editing, visual effects, and it lost all of them to E.T. because this was the same year.
I wonder what the highest grossing film of that year was.
Right?
Oh my gosh, you know what else came out this year that we talked about years ago is The Thing.
Oh god, that was this year too?
Yeah, remember, because it like they were saying that was probably the reason it bombed. We talked about it in that episode, if anyone wants to
because
go back and listen to it.
They just had super cute aliens, and now
the opposite.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of E.T. and a lot of people, including I think Siskel and Ebert, were like, I think people really wanted like friendly aliens.
Yeah, they were kind of
so
vibing with that, and then it was like, oh no. This also got some recognition at the Saturn Awards. So it was nominated for 6 awards. It won 3, one for Best Horror or Thriller, one for Best Makeup, and one for Best Supporting Actress for Zelda Rubinstein. It was nominated for Best Actress for Jo Beth Williams, Best Director for Tobe Hooper, and Best Music for Jerry Goldsmith. It was nominated for 1 BAFTA for Special Effects, which it won. And it was nominated for 1 Young Artist, Best Young Supporting Actress for Heather O'Rourke. It did not win that, but it was nominated. It is also remembered in the following lists. In the New York Times, it is categorized among the best 1,000 films ever made. The AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills, it comes in at number 84. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movie Quotes, number 69 is, of course, They're Here. And the cast of this movie, we had Jo Beth Williams as Diane, Craig T. Nelson as Steve, Heather O'Rourke as Carol Ann, Dominique Dunn as Dana, Oliver Robbins as Robbie, Beatrice Straight as Dr. Lisla. Okay, I can't read my handwriting, listeners. You should know this by now. We had Michael Lawson as Ryan, Martin Casella as Marty, and Zelda Rubinstein as Tangina, I think is how it's pronounced.
I'm really happy that she won an award for that, by the way. We're going to get into that character later, but I'm happy because she's, in my opinion, the best character in the movie. So I'm happy that she got an award, even if it was like a Saturn Award or something, because I feel like she's probably also, besides the, Carol Ann, I think, that's the psychic medium is the one that a lot of people think of. Another really quotable line, of course, that has been kind of spoofed over the years is, "This house is clean."
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, I have some thoughts about that too. I threw in some bonuses just from people that I recognize because I picked the movie. We have James Caan as Mr. Teague.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace. He's a great comedic actor, and he's also another one who makes the movie as kind of the villain, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. And then we had Michael McManus as Ben Tuthill. And the reason I mentioned both those people is they both had supporting roles on different episodes of The Golden Girls. So that's why I recognize them. And then finally, as I call him Beer Man, he had an actual name, but if I said what his name is, you'll have no idea who that is. So the guy who's bringing the beer and falls off his bike, that is Dirk Blocker, who you may know as Hitchcock from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Also the son of the late, great Dan Blocker, who I grew up with on Bonanza.
That's actually, I know the character Hitchcock from, that's crazy. I never would have known that was the same guy. And kudos, even though it's a fictional character, I'm kind of happy he doesn't, curse out those kids for tripping him up. I feel really bad for. As a kid, I thought it was funny, but when I see that now, I'm just like, gosh, that's like half of his beer. And on football Sunday too. Oh no.
Right. So this movie was very interesting for me because I really wanted to see this movie, and so I finally got to see it, and I enjoyed it. But for me, the more I thought about it afterwards, the less I liked it.
Really?
Not for any like bad reason or really anything, but to me it was a very unfulfilling movie. Like, I think the best way, for at least from my experience, I could describe it is it had phenomenal acting, phenomenal special effects, but it was pretty light on the story. It was like it was to the point to where when there wasn't something spooky or special effecty happening, the movie was boring. Like,
part of the reason I feel like it works not just by, like, it kind of reminds me of the types of movies that Spielberg was making at the time, which, again, another reason people forget that Tobe Hooper directed this is because Spielberg was so hands-on with writing it, to the point where some people would even argue that Spielberg sort of ghost-directed this.
And I will touch on that.
I disagree. Like, unless you bring some info to me that, because I feel like that's almost kind of disrespectful to Tobe Hooper. Like, again, everyone has a lot of assumptions about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but he is a really good filmmaker, and I know that a lot of his skill and his ideas went into this movie. You can tell that it was written by Steven Spielberg. I will hands down agree with anyone who it's like he was in charge of the story. But I don't know, like we talked about this in some episode we recorded this year where it gets annoying when everyone just sort of unifies every aspect of the film to the filmmaker. Mm-hmm. Like a lot, the special effects were done by ILM. I forget if I talked about this on another episode, but I just watched a documentary on Disney Plus about them, and they talked about one of the, all the effects that they've done over the years. And it's actually pretty crazy. The house imploding.
Oh, when it folds in on itself.
Yeah, it's literally like just a shot of they built a miniature house and had all of the parts of the house attached to string. And with a high-speed camera, they sucked the house through like a tube by pulling the strings all at once.
Oh my God.
And that's and then they superimpose that on the shot, and that's how they did it. But it was the most difficult part. There was a bunch of difficult parts of this movie, but that was kind of cool. It's like, it's a real practical.
Right.
And that was the other thing too when they were making the movie is the word implosion. A lot of them were like, well, wait, like implosion? Explosions are easy, but what do you mean implode? Like it sucks. It was actually kind of a brain teaser for a lot of the special effects people because they'd never done essentially the opposite of an explosion. So that was cool, as well as a bunch of other things. I feel like the one, it's ironic because it's one of the bits that traumatized me as a kid, but I feel like one of the worst. No, that did scare me as a kid, but what really freaked me out when I saw this was the dude peeling his face off.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's funny because you watch it now and it's not very good, even like compared to other ILM stuff. Like this was, I think, right after Indiana Jones, and they had Nazi faces melting and stuff, and
that
so comparing it to
as a kid.
Yeah, it scared me as a kid too. In fact, actually, even as a kid when I saw this, I didn't know who ILM was. I knew who Spielberg was, but that scene actually reminded me of like Temple of Doom or something. Like
right.
Even as a kid, when I grew up, I realized it was all made by the same people and it made sense. But when that scene happened, I was just like, oh my God, this is just like that ending in Indiana Jones. And it was. And what's weird is the effect was better in Indiana Jones. So it almost feels like they phoned it in. But yeah, I'm kind of curious. What was, because the other reason I was surprised you hadn't seen this is one of your favorite movies of all time is The Exorcist, and this kind of feels like The Exorcist for kids.
I can kind of see that.
I feel like that's dumbing it down a lot, but you know what I mean. It's
I get what you mean. There's
even an exorcist character in this.
Yeah,
and it's a woman who you would not expect to be so cool. So like. Yeah. I don't know. Part of the reason I was excited for you to see this is it's like The Exorcist, but a lot more family friendly and without all of the curse words and the masturbating with crucifixes and whatnot.
Yeah. Which people are still shocked that The Exorcist is one of my favorite movies. And I'm like, I don't know. For me, it's like, I guess it's the fact that they actually try to investigate it, seriously. And it's not all weird and everything, like with, I don't know. For some reason, just something about that whole build up to the actual when we have the big showdown at the end for me has always been one of the greatest things about The Exorcist. Which is weird. Like I said, that why I'm like, unless there was something exciting happening, I felt, kind of disinterested in the characters and everything like that. I did have a problem with the parents a lot. I'm like, oh my God, these are like the most irresponsible parents ever.
Wait, in this movie?
In this movie, yeah. Well,
how so?
Okay. So, I mean, I'm talking about how they're portrayed pre-paranormal events, which I guess you can argue that doesn't happen because it starts off with her talking to the TV. But like, you know what I mean, before the main events start happening.
There are things about the parents that weirded me out because not this time watching it, but I feel like it was like a few years ago I was watching it, probably around Halloween. It was probably on Netflix or something. And I did not notice, and maybe there isn't one, but it feels like there is a massive age gap between the father and the mother.
Yeah,
like the mother
that didn't bother me,
be,
but I know what you're saying. I can see it.
It didn't bother me. It's just something I didn't notice when I was a kid, and when I rewatched this as an adult, I was like, "Are they like 10 years apart?" And that's the thing. Like, I do remember like teenage me watching this, thinking the mom was very attractive. Probably because she's wearing basically booty shorts at the beginning. But and
the end scene where she's wearing just panties.
Yeah, it was probably like 5 years ago or something, but something clicked in me where I was like, that's weird. Like, and that too, it's like, their oldest daughter's like 16, and they even say the the mother's age is like 32 or something. And I was doing the math in my head and I was like, when did she have that daughter then?
Yeah,
like,
when she was 16?
Yeah, right? Which, I mean, I guess technically it would have been in the 70s and that wasn't as weird as it is nowadays. But like, I don't know. That was something that was weird. But now you got me curious. What is irresponsible about them before the haunting?
Before the haunting, okay. So one of the first big things, and I know you're probably going to want to like slap my hand for this, but there's something I'm sorry. When you have a house full of children, one of y'all has to stay sober. So y'all sitting in your bedroom getting high was a big turnoff for me, for you as people. I was like, seriously, one of you please stay sober, okay?
It was bedtime. That was something I didn't notice as a kid that I noticed which is weird that I didn't notice that as a kid. I think it's because as a kid, I'm guessing maybe I just thought that it was a cigarette or something. I do not know how I didn't notice that, but that was something like as a teenager, I was like, wait, they were smoking a joint? What?
It felt weird and out of place to me though, also in the movie. I don't know why.
No, I actually kind of agree, especially since they show that the father's like a big Reagan guy. I was like, but he's smoking weed, Mr. Hypocrite. Like, I don't know. I disagree. If it was in the middle of the day, I would agree with you that but since everyone was in bed, it's like, whatever. Like the kids are in bed. But I know what you mean, partly because I remember being shocked when I saw it when I was older and being like, wait, they're smoking a joint? I don't remember this.
It was kind of like, kind of reminds you like in the 70s, it's when, weed was starting to be talked about on a mainstream level. It seems like, well, no, not accepted. I said talked about. There's a difference.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It definitely, I mean, it was, the 60s, it was like, and that's the thing too. These parents would have been like, in their 20s or teens when, the 60s were happening. So the idea of them wanting to is not, again, it's like rewatching it this time. I think I noticed it last time too, but he's reading like Reagan's book. Reagan and I'm just like, really, buddy? Like the just say no to drugs, Reagan, but you're having you're getting stoned with your wife. Okay.
Well, there was that because like if I remember, have you seen 9 to 5, right? With Dolly Parton and Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin.
I have not.
Okay, maybe a future thing, but like there's a scene in it. So that's just like a workplace comedy, and then there's this random scene in it where all the characters decide to get high together, and I'm just like, why? What was the purpose of that scene? And so to me, it's kind of like in this scene too. I'm like, this just comes out. I'm like, oh, is this going to come back again? Like maybe this is like some Vice or something. Because I'd never seen this movie before, so it was just kind of just a weird thing. And then the weird thing is the kids are aware of it because if you remember when they bury the bird, she says he doesn't like the smell of this box, and that's the box she keeps her marijuana in.
Oh, I actually didn't catch that. One thing I will say that I don't know if you picked up on, this isn't me being, ooh, I'm smart. This is like something that people have talked about. One thing that kind of goes in with the big twist ending with this film is very critical. And this kind of goes with Tobe Hooper too, because again, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, outside of what it is, it's very critical of a lot of political institutions in America. Like the fact that the family used to work at the meat industry, but then they lost their job. And so anyway, if we review that movie, I'll get into that. But one thing that he does kind of carry over into this, which I'm not sure if it was Spielberg's idea or if it was Tobe Hooper's, but this movie is definitely very openly critical about suburbia and kind of, that aspect of the American dream, and that's where I kind of think the smoking weed and reading the Reagan thing is not accidental. I think he's kind of, especially with it being early in the movie, I think he's kind of trying to show that the father is sort of going down the same path as his boss, like he's just this hypocritical, potentially, like obviously he has a conscience by the end of the movie, but it's like he's kind of the best salesman, and as the boss shows, like anything to make a profit and stuff. And I kind of feel like that ties in with that, like the idea of like smoking a joint in bed while reading an book.
I mean, that wasn't the only thing, but like that one, I was just like, seriously, you're not gonna. And then especially because also that night the kids happen to come. The kids are terrified of the storm. And they know that at least their son is scared of storms or whatever. And I don't know, something about that whole sequence just bugged me. They ended up coming there anyway. But then later, I think the next day, this isn't particularly the parents' fault, but I was just kind of, this scene's kind of just gross, even by back then.
Oh, I know what scene you're going to talk about. I actually forgot about it. I'm sure I've noticed it in past viewings, but it's about the daughter and the construction workers, right?
Right? It's like she's an actual child. Like, and then...
Yeah.
It's like it wasn't like she was like some pretty like 25. She was an actual child, and they still kept it in there for comedy. I mean, I know the whole thing, it's a different time. That was weird to me. But then the mom sees them, essentially, they don't come into the house, but he's like going into her like window and taking their stuff. And I'm just like, look, if that had been my mom in this person, she would have thrown them out. No, I would not feel safe with these people around my children. To me,
I agree. I kind of think it's like a time thing. It's gross. I agree with you. One thing I kind of picked up on watching it was like, I feel like it doesn't make it okay, but I feel like they're not, I don't think they're contractors. I think they're like neighborhood friends, like probably getting paid to do it as like a favor.
Yeah.
Cause they all know them, you know, like, oh, Mrs. I love your coffee and whatever. If anything, that actually makes it worse because it's like, you know, the daughter. But I feel like, again, like you could do this with like sitcoms from the 70s and stuff where people do weird shit that would not fly nowadays.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it is one of those. I don't think it ruins the movie, but I know what you mean. And I also thought it was weird the mom didn't do anything about it.
Right. She's just like, okay, let me just close the blinds. Doesn't even close the window. She just closes the blinds. Like, girl, come on.
I meant with the daughter, but the reason reason I don't think she did was because the daughter like flipped them off, and then the mom like laughs at it or whatever. Like, I don't know, it doesn't get to the point. And then there's kind of at the end of the movie when it's like, oh, we're gonna meet at the Holiday Inn, and the daughter's like, oh, that place. So there's like kind of a joke in there, like, oh, she's been going to the motel with boys. Which there's something, again, other things about this that I feel like were a Tobe Hooper thing. I think the political stuff, I think also some of the male gazy stuff, like the mom wearing hot pants.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that in like Texas Chainsaw. And I need to see more of his like later movies, but there's some things like that joke, for instance. I feel like that was probably more of a Tobe Hooper joke than a Spielberg joke.
And then the last thing is, oh my God, the amount of times they leave their kids alone while the haunting is going on. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like the first time when that one kid is taken out of the window by the tree, right? They leave essentially their baby alone in the house. I'm like, grab the child, take them with you. But of course they can't because, no plot. But then after that, the amount of times they leave him alone or they leave her alone, or the fact that they've just gone through this terrifying experience where they had to bring the daughter back from the other side and they just decide, yeah, should be fine. Let's just sleep in. I mean, I know they said it was clean, but who would really feel that comfortable?
Well, or at least that the dad was like, no, I don't want the kids sleeping here tonight. And the mom's like, oh,
yeah, okay, that's true. He does. Well, because he's like, and so there was that, and I'm just like, oh my God, have we learned nothing from the last 9 times? Because like, I watch a lot of or I've watched a lot of that docuseries. It used to be on Discovery. I don't know what happened now. It's called A Haunting. And anytime the stuff,
I like that show too.
Anytime the stuff got bad with the family, they'd always move everybody into like one room. And I'm like, why were we not doing that late? Or like later in the, to me, it would have made more sense if they stayed there, but they all kind of slept in one room together. I don't know.
Technically, they did do that during the investigation.
That is
part
true.
Part of it is plot convenience. It's like the old don't run into the shed kind of thing. Like, it's just a horror movie trope of people not doing things. I will also say that this family, I think they were a little too shell-shocked by a tree trying to eat their son.
That is true.
To, think logic. Like, if that happened to me, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, if that happens, you're not going to think logically. You're just going to run outside in the rain and
right.
And that's the other kind of funny thing about this movie is how over the top the haunting is. Like, again, compared to The Exorcist, a lot of things are really subdued in that movie.
Yeah.
This movie is full-on wacky haunted house stuff. It's not, it's scary, but it's also, a tree is eating a kid, a clown doll's attacking a kid, a girl gets trapped in a like, it is so over the top that it's it's kind of absurd. And
Yeah.
like, to the point where like you really do kind of, it's hard to even criticize the family because it's, you know, like, especially when they go and ask for help from the investigators, it's like, what do you, and in fact, that is one of the best scenes in the movie is when the investigators are like talking about, oh, we've seen some crazy things, you know.
Oh, they open the door.
This toy car moved 25 feet. I've got a time-lapse video of it. It took
7 hours.
And then the dad's just like, and then he opens the door and it's just like madness.
That's great. Okay. So I actually do kind of like, though, because I was expecting that to be a thing where the paranormal investigators just like take off. Yeah, no, we're not doing this. But I do kind of like they stayed and helped. I like situations like, I don't know. I've always kind of liked that situation.
Well, and I like the different character because there's the lead investigator who's like a middle-aged woman. She's very spiritual. She knows a lot. You know, she's the one who knows the medium and stuff, and she's kind of the, you know, most seasoned veteran of everything. Then you've got the African-American gentleman who's kind of more of the tech guy.
Right,
He's a lot more courageous, but he's also like into the tech part of it. And then you've got the very nerdy, cowardly jerk who thinks the whole thing is staged up until he peels his face off, and then he never comes back after that night. And he's the one who's just kind of like, there's probably like a recording device hidden somewhere for the girl's voice or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and of course he's the one that gets the most brutal haunting, and then he won't be returning. But that was kind of neat. Like, they all have different like characteristics and stuff, and but yeah, like I figured you would like that aspect of it too, that it had kind of, again, this is more of an adventure movie. It doesn't really like, you know, get in the nitty gritty stuff of paranormal investigations, but it has that aspect of it where it's like, oh, let's turn to science first, and then when science, all it can really do is just record the things happening, that's when they bring in the other character.
So one of the things that's bugged me since I've watched it was I just have too many questions, you know, at the end of the movie. And, you know, usually, you know, that's normal. And I get, it's like, because I tend to like paranormal horror. You know, there's usually at least some unanswered questions. But for me, there was like too many unanswered questions.
What are some of the questions?
So my first one is, 1, what triggered the haunting? 2, why now? 3, if they've been there for 10 years, why now? 4, why did she think the house was clean? 5, how did they find the psychological research place at the university? Because they even say, what do I do? Go to the phone book and look up strange disturbances. 6, I want to know more about why only this house, because it's supposed entire neighbors. Why is it only this house? I want to know more about the credentials of the Tanagina, I think is her name. There was just a lot of stuff that I was just like, huh? And then my other one is why does the haunting escalate and de-escalate? That's not normal. Like, because it starts from basically nothing to suddenly we have trees eating people, and then it goes back down to just being lights and sounds and everything, and until the end, when the house tries to eat them again.
So first off, I feel like a lot of these concerns kind of come from the fact, and if any of you, I don't think we've ever really talked about this, but one thing about Sweet Tea, ladies and gentlemen, is that you actually, you dig this stuff in real life. You really like paranormal investigations and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like,
you're like,
feel
bitch, it's
like,
a movie.
Well, so not just it's a movie, it's an adventure movie. You know,
right.
Like, again, going back to, like, Indiana Jones, like, when they're talking about the Ark of the Covenant, they don't explain, you know, like, oh, it was, you know, like, they assume, you know, like, you've probably been to a Bible class, you know what the Ark of the Covenant is.
Right, yeah.
You know, like, they don't go into the, you know, it goes from, we know something's here, to, you know, the bit of, like, the map with the airplane flying. That's kind of the same thing with them going to the investigators. It's like, obviously there's probably a university somewhere. Paranormal studies, especially at this time, like, was not that crazy, like, to find someone doing something at a university. Like, there are actual places that study that sort of thing. So I feel like you're just supposed to kind of connect the dots with some things. And there's even some fan theory. Like the most prominent one with why now is they're building a pool. They're excavating the dead bodies. So that's why now. And in fact, if you think about it, what is the day right before all the shit hits the fan? It's right when those creepy neighbors are bulldozing their backyard. So that's kind of the expected fan explanation as to why their house, why right then. Already, you know, the disrespect of not moving the bodies, but they were the only family that was digging the bodies up. Obviously not intentionally.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're disturbing the dead. So that's why their house and right then, at least, you know, that's the understood fan theory. And I think you're kind of supposed to connect those dots. And yeah, a lot of it also, and then I knew this would eventually come up, but so this is a franchise, or it attempted to be a franchise. And I can tell you, I've seen all three, and I feel like I maybe will review them on the show, but I feel like in your own personal time, watch Poltergeist 2 and 3, because you'll see why having all of the answers kind of ruins it, because they do sort of explain the entity that was trying to keep Carol Ann. It turns out, like, it's not the beast, it's not the devil, it's like a particular creepy ghost.
Okay.
And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, the more you explain it, the less interesting it gets. You know what I mean?
Okay, I see what you mean. So
like
kind of like
mystery.
Well, because kind of like having these, because I do know that this was intended, at least from Spielberg's angle, to be a one-off.
Yes.
And so I guess what you're trying to say is having these unanswered questions is kind of what kept it creepy.
Again, yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, again, like going back to Indiana Jones and the Nazi face melting, it's kind of like if after that happened, they went into this explanation of why, you know, it's like it happened, you know, we don't necessarily, you know, frankly, like most of the need to know stuff is explained by the spiritual medium, you know, and it's very vague, like, oh, there's a light and Carol Ann gives off a light and the ghosts want to follow her light and they're distracted by the light of, you know, the afterlife, and there's this evil, you know, it's like, that's all we really need to know. You know, if you really want to take, there are movies where they take the investigative angle more seriously, but those are different movies. Again, like this is even outside of like horror, quote unquote. This is another one of Spielberg's like family adventure movies, like Indiana Jones, or, you know, not Spielberg but Lucas, like Star Wars or something. Like this is it's a spooky themed adventure movie, more or less, you know, with some elements of paranormal investigation, exorcism, but more in a general sense for a more consumer friendly market, you know?
Yeah.
Like everyone knows about people exorcising ghosts from the house. Not everyone is going to be like, but how does it work? You know what I mean? And that's kind of, this was more for like broad appeal than anything.
Right. I mean, okay, that makes sense. I mean, I guess I can now, I do want to rewatch this movie because if nothing more, but then because the effects were amazing. I actually argued with my mom on this. We watched it together. I actually think that the effects look better in this than in E.T. She disagrees. So
there are some things that are shocking, like that it came out in 1982. Like, for instance, the bit where she's trying to save her kids at the very end of the movie from getting sucked back into the gullet, whatever you want to call it, the hole in their wall, and that ghost monster appears. And I'm still amazed that must have blown people's minds in 1982.
Right. Oh,
that looks like as good as like CGI today. And it wasn't even CGI. It was like trick photography. And it's like, you know, and probably that thing was like a puppet that they made look ghostly or whatever. And it's like, that looks so good.
So,
you know, not everything is aged perfectly, but there are some effects in this that are just like, in fact, actually, that was something I was kind of thinking about too. Another Spielberg movie this reminds me a little bit of is Close Encounters. Because that had a lot of really mind-blowing like alien effects. And
there is a connection. You know, there is a connection besides Spielberg.
The scene that I'm thinking of that really reminds me of Close Encounters is the bit with the orbs where they're watching back and it's all these like dead people.
Oh,
and they're like, where are they coming from and stuff. That reminds me of Close Encounters. I think partly because it's as creepy as it is, it's a much more like awe-inspiring kind of scene.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like the ending of that movie.
Yeah, there was something emotional, but like that scene wasn't scary. It was more like you're just transfixed by what's happening. So
exactly.
In addition to viewing this movie, I also watched a full-length documentary about the trilogy.
Oh God, yeah, dude. Well, I figured you were going to do your research, but I'm sure, like, I know one thing you're going to talk about, but this movie is kind of one of those. There are 3 horror movies I can think of off the top of my head that are quote unquote cursed.
Yeah.
One of them's The Exorcist. One of them is, I was just thinking of this earlier today. What was, The Omen. Mm-hmm. And one of them is this.
Yeah.
And this one has I honestly think this is the most cursed because there were actual, The Omen did have a death. Mm-hmm. This had 2 deaths.
Well, technically, I think 4 total.
Yeah.
You're
gonna bring it up. So
before I go with the curse, because I watched this documentary. It was actually put out in 2002, back when E still did stuff related to the entertainment industry.
Which explains the editing of the video you showed.
That is not from that documentary. But this is a separate one.
It's from something else, but it definitely looked like it was from the early 2000s with its ADHD editing. It's like
every 5 seconds.
Didn't even know. Yeah, just the quick cutting and the Jesus. Anyway, but yeah, continue. So I watched a documentary. It was the True Hollywood story on the Poltergeist curse, but that was basically the idea behind it. But they spend most of the time just talking about how the movies were made. So one of the things, this is actually derived from a script that came about because Spielberg didn't want to do. I think it was Universal. I think that's who did Close Encounters. They wanted a sequel to Close Encounters. He didn't want to do one. So he came up with this idea for a horror film called Night Watchers. Actually, originally it was called Watch the Night Skies, and then it became, I think, Night Watchers. Basically, the idea was it was a story about an isolated farmhouse, and this family was supposed to be kind of like a wholesome family, and they're under attack from evil entities. He actually had a script written. He did a treatment. He had a script written by the guy who did the parody of Jaws called Piranha, which I don't know why he hired that guy to do the script. They ended up parting ways. I can see why, because I think the aliens' names were like, I remember one of the aliens' names was Squirt, and I'm like, seriously? It's like, okay. Anyway, so that did make it, but he took a lot of the ideas from that, and he divided them, and they basically ended up becoming E.T. and Poltergeist. So Poltergeist, obviously, the main idea about a wholesome family being under attack, came from this. And supposedly this was based on a case of poltergeist activity from 1958 in Long Island, I believe. It's, if you want to read more about it later, it's called the Herman haunting. It's not as dramatic as this, though. But it's still kind of weird. And that's what this movie was based on?
Yeah, that's maybe where he got the idea.
I will interject to just say, because I haven't watched whatever documentary you've watched, but I've, over the years, like, I love watching like behind the scenes stuff, and a good amount, not everything, and I do believe what you're saying, that he got some ideas from that haunting, but some of the scares were actually from Spielberg's childhood. Yes. The tree, for instance, was something that he was really afraid of in one of his houses when he was a kid. Yes. And same thing with the clown doll. Like, yes. So those 2 things particularly were just like from Spielberg being afraid of them as a kid.
Right. So I think this case was more about the idea of what poltergeists can do and how they can terrify. And then in this documentary, they actually interviewed his sister. I think her name is Sue, if I remember correctly. And she shared that. She's like, yeah, there was this tree outside that freaked him out. It would scratch the window during storms. That's what happens in this. And she said when she saw the movie and they see the hands come through and grab him, I'm like, okay, now I understand what he was afraid was going to happen. She talked about that, and she talked about how he was scared of clowns. But he did... So he ended up he met with the writers who ended up writing the movie with him, because they were going to pitch him a project, and he ended up talking about how he was working on kind of like a paranormal thing, and they called him up later and said, hey, we'd rather work on the paranormal script with you than what we were pitching, and they ended up getting the job. But yeah, he wanted realism with it, and actually one of the things I do respect about this movie is it does take the study of it kind of seriously in the film. It's not kind of a joke, really. And so he said he wanted the writers wanted them to meet with mediums, sidekicks, ghost hunters to kind of get a feel for, what their craft was. And they said actually the writers came back to him after one meeting, and they were like, okay, so we want this movie to stand out. So how about we needed people to die. And he was like, well, how many? They were like, okay, the whole family. And Spielberg was like, no. So they talk it back and forth and eventually get it down to they were just going to have the little girl die. Well, that was what they agreed upon. They went back and rewrote it, and that ended up not happening. But I love that they were just like, we want the whole family has to die. Drew Barrymore auditioned for the role of Carol Ann, and Spielberg said, you're not right for this movie, but I think you're right for E.T. So that's how Drew Barrymore got cast in E.T. was because she tried out for this movie. And the girl that she ended up picking, that he ended up picking for Heather O'Rourke, he discovered her in the MGM cafeteria, or the commissary. She was sitting there waiting for her mom, and he came over to her. I guess she had the right look or whatever, and he talked to her. And she says, my name's Heather O'Rourke, but I can't talk to you because you're a stranger. And so he sat with her and waited for her mom to get back, and they talked about it, and they worked it out. I think that's kind of hilarious. So E.T. was in pre-production while they were working on this movie, and then Poltergeist was being pitched and thought of and written and everything while he was working on Raiders. But people talked about how this was a grueling production. The WGA went on strike during the filming of this movie, so the writers of the movie would have to pick it outside MGM where the movie they wrote was being filmed. So they talked about, the actors have talked about, this is a very grueling production to work on. Like I said, the WGA went on strike. The writers had to strike their own movie, and they said that some of them, particularly Jo Beth Williams and Dominique Dunn, had some paranormal experiences at their own homes while they were filming it. Take that with what you will. But this is my favorite, on the set story. So Jo Beth Williams, at the end of the movie, if you remember, she has to go. Or was it that scene? Yeah, she falls into the pit with all the skeletons washing up now, and so she's down there. And so she said that was filmed inside a tank at MGM. They had built this thing inside a tank, and then they had these giant, huge lights that were saying they would shine down to light it and everything. And she said she had this this strange fear of the light falling into this water pit and then her being electrocuted. So she's
not an unreasonable fear.
So she said what ended up happening is Steven Spielberg got waiter pants, and he went into the water, and he would stand in the water with her while she filmed her scenes off screen. And basically he told her that way, basically he wanted him to trust what they knew what they were doing. She said, that way, if it falls in and electrocutes you, it'll electrocute me too. I kind of laughed about that. I thought that was pretty funny and kind of actually a charming thing to do.
Yeah, no, he's good, man. He's you can say what you want about Spielberg, but one thing is that he's definitely a people person.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of his strengths as a director. Because, I mean, I've talked about this, how, people say, oh, the director's job is, the whole film. And I'm like, not really. It's mostly dealing with the actors, unless you're, a famous director.
Right.
But that's kind of what he's best at, is, talking to people and, being with the actors. So that... I'm not surprised. That's the first time I've heard that story, but that sounds about right up
So that's one of
his alley.
One of the things I liked about this documentary is it was literally just talking, even though it was an true Hollywood story, it was talking with literally the people that were there. So they were sharing their stories. Well, the ones that are still alive. We're getting to the curse. We're almost there, I promise. I just found a whole bunch of I found out a whole bunch of stuff about this movie.
You're bringing the fun facts. This is fine. This is where you learn lots of cool new trivia bits about the movie. This is what I usually do, but you're bringing the heat this time, and I appreciate it.
So now I wanted to talk about Tobe Hooper, and there's all, like you've talked about, there's this whole question among the general public, not among, movie people or whatever, or maybe some of them, who was really directing this project. So this project, the reason Steven Spielberg didn't direct this project to begin with is because he wanted this movie made, but Universal wouldn't make it. But he was under contract with Universal that he couldn't direct anywhere else. MGM picked it up, but he couldn't direct it, so he got around it by producing it. But
gotcha. And that's like, I know I would argue he had full creative control over the narrative. Like the story, I think, is all him. Mm-hmm. The one thing, and I saw this in like a making of documentary or whatever, and again, no one talks about this. He handpicked Tobe Hooper because he liked the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So
right.
Like it was his, like he sought Tobe Hooper out. So like he wouldn't have done that if he didn't respect him as a filmmaker. So again, like I do think this has Spielberg's signature all over it, but I don't think that like he ghost directed it. I feel like that's taking it a bit far. I think he was very, very hands-on with it. Like even that story you just told, he was on set a lot of the time.
Right.
But, he wasn't like, forcing everyone to, like, again, he wasn't telling Tobe Hooper what to do.
Well, so there's some tea.
Ooh.
So some tea. So they talked with, and I'm trying to, did I write his name down? And I didn't write his Craig, and I did not write his last name down. Great. So they interviewed, some of the people who worked in the special effects. And they also interviewed some of the cast. Now, one of the cast members, and I don't remember who said it, but they said there was a couple times, Tobe Hooper would have a scene set up, have a scene lit, and Spielberg would come in and be like, no, and change it.
That's disappointing.
There was that wouldn't happen all the time. That happened a few times. There was a special effects guy. His name was Craig, and I don't remember what his last name was. So he talked in particular. There's two major instances that he talked about. He talked about the steak scene. So in the original script, the steak was described as cancerous looking. So with that in mind, he met with Tobe Hooper. They talked about it, what he wanted. So the makeup, I think he was a special effects makeup guy, I think is who it was. So he came in, brought in a prototype and said, okay, this is what I'm thinking. How does this look? And Tobe Hooper was like, yes, perfect, thanks. And then later that same day, Steven saw it and was like, yeah, I don't think so. No, this isn't the steak. So that guy was a little miffed because, he'd taken it in one entire direction that he had discussed with the director. And then, he put all this time and money into it, and then it basically had to go into the trash. So he said after that, he always made sure not only to run everything through Tobe Hooper, but then also to run it through Steven first, and then run it through Tobe. Which
that's disappointing.
That's disappointing.
But at least I don't know. It's again. I'm not surprised, but again, like I'd love to sit down with Tobe Hooper and get his opinion.
Yeah, he wasn't interviewed in this documentary, so I don't know if that's telling or if he just doesn't do interviews. Do you know what I mean?
Or maybe like that's one of those things. I don't think he's passed away. I think he's still around. So I don't know. He's one of those directors I know about him, but I can't really even put a face to him, which is funny. But it's funny because when Spielberg is interviewed about this movie, he's always like, "Oh no, Tobe had like, It's one of those things where like he was kind of the hot shit at the time, so maybe he was just kind of getting used to calling the shots,
right?
But again, I feel like it's a little uncharitable to say that like Tobe Hooper basically didn't do anything. But I'm not surprised if Spielberg was a little bit
controlling.
Yeah.
They also said that Steven Spielberg actually has a cameo in this movie. So do you remember the scene that scared you as a kid? Describe that scene for me.
Okay, and I think I know what you're getting. I think I'm remembering this tidbit from probably something I saw forever ago. But so there's a scene where one of the paranormal investigators is going to get a snack. He gets some steak and a chicken leg out of the fridge, and right before his eyes, they turn rancid and covered in, like bugs and whatever. The steak's cancerous, as the script said. So he goes to like wash his mouth out in the bathroom, and as he's looking at himself in the mirror, like the light turns into like a heat light, and his face is like melting off, and he just starts peeling it off until there's like a skull there. Now, what I'm guessing you're going to say is that at one point, the person peeling the face off is Spielberg under all the makeup.
So those are his arms.
Okay.
And the guy who did the makeup said that's Steven Spielberg's arms because it was such a long process, and he didn't want there to be, basically, he didn't want to get to the end and have him be like, I don't like the way, who pulled those off like that? That looks stupid. So basically, they had him do it so he couldn't complain about it. But
that's actually funny and kind of petty, and I kind of love it because it's like, oh, I don't like how that looks. Well, you're the one who did it.
Right? So
blame yourself.
So because there's all these things. I mean, now the main cast has said no. Tobe Hooper was definitely the director. He was very nice. He, it was probably difficult for him because, like, I talked about those scenes where he would set up a scene and have it lit and everything, and Steven would be like, no. But they said, he was the director. He was the one that was, talking to us about our, our lines, motivations, all that fun stuff. So he was the director of the film. So that is the cast. So because it's the cast talking, and it's like 30 years later, and there's nothing, I'm like, I'm willing to believe them. I'm like, yeah, like I think it's basically what you said. He was kind of used to having control over everything. It is something that it is kind of a story and an idea that he had conceived. So he still viewed it as his baby, or basically, and he did stuff. But I do still think that he was in control. In fact, when the press started to come out about the movie being released, Hooper was very upset because all these papers would run it as they would talk about it, the Steven Spielberg production Poltergeist, and like they would either not mention Tobe Hooper or have Tobe Hooper way down on the list. Which I'm like,
it still continues to this day, man. It's so funny. Like, people often forget, again, like even like horror fans often forget that he directed this. And it's funny because watching this again, it's like a Tobe Hooper film. It's like, it says it right there in the opening credits.
You can't really blame the press though, because literally the first thing that it says on the screen is a Steven Spielberg production.
Yeah.
But I understand that, and I thought Spielberg understood his frustration, so he ended up taking out a full-page ad in Variety with a personal letter to everybody saying, "Listen, this is Tobe Hooper's film. This is not my film." And that seemed to kind of fix things and kind of smooth things over with Tobe Hooper. But
yeah, well, and I mean, it's also like, again, like with him on the set, that makes sense. With him being controlling, I'm sure it was kind of adding insult to injury.
Right.
But it's like, it's how the media does things, man. Like they'll take something and just spin it a certain way. Like, I don't know. It's one of those things where, if someone more famous than the filmmaker is attached to the film, it becomes about the famous person just because they need to, get people to read the story.
Right. No, I get you, but I still kind of feel bad for Tobe Hooper and all this. I'm like,
everyone should feel bad for Tobe Hooper. If anyone takes anything from this podcast, it should be that Poltergeist was directed by Tobe Hooper. Because again, as I said, it's something that a lot of people don't really. Again, like even like seasoned horror fans will often forget that he did this movie.
Right. Exactly. And so, because even what I'm trying to say, even not legacily, but like historically now, people kind of go back, oh, that's Steven Spielberg movie, and it really wasn't. Like, if you think about it, it's like me saying Memoirs of a Geisha was a Steven Spielberg movie just because he produced it.
I actually didn't even know he produced that one. But yeah, like there were other movies that Amblin did in the 80s that Spielberg did not direct that feel like I can't think of any right now, but this isn't Tobe Hooper is not the only casualty to this phenomenon, because there were other films that were directed by other people that felt like Spielberg movies because he produced them and probably also had quite a bit of like creative control.
So now let's segue into what you've been waiting for, the curse, the Poltergeist curse.
Woo!
Okay, so for those of you who don't know what the Poltergeist curse is, or supposedly is, it's essentially the idea that for whatever reason there is something I don't want to say unholy, because I mean basically there's something evil associated with the film, and that many prominent cast members have died. There was even in the early days of the internet being passed around that all the primary cast members of the film had died, which is, just objectively untrue. So basically, what got this all started off is a few months after the movie came out in 1982, I think it was November 1982. Could be wrong. Don't quote me here. Dominique Dunne, who played Dana in the movie, the teenage girl, was essentially beaten to near death by her abusive ex-boyfriend, John Sweeney, who was weird. He was a chef, but he would I think they said at one point he had carved a chocolate mask in the likeness of her face and brought it to her, which is so odd. And basically he came over one time when she was running lines with an actor friend of hers, who I believe his name was Michael Packer, I believe his name was. And he came over, she went outside to talk to him, they started yelling, and this is what's hilarious to me about you talking about putting on the Poltergeist soundtrack and it being so soothing. To drown out the noise of them yelling, Michael Packer put on the Poltergeist soundtrack. Just dude, what is wrong with you? Eventually the noise got too loud, he went outside, and basically he had essentially choked and beaten her into a coma state. And she died 4 days later after being in a coma because of her tragic demise. This would start the idea of the Poltergeist curse, that it was cursed. And there are 4 victims that are relegated to this curse. The first one's Dominique Dunne, who we just discussed. The next is Julian Beck, who played Kane in the second one, which I don't really think belongs there, and I'll tell you why in a second.
Yeah, I don't. Honestly, I'll let you finish. I don't think that's my catchphrase this episode. I'm gonna let you finish.
I'm gonna let you finish.
No, but the Kane in the second one. He's the character, by the way, I was talking about, where I'm like, oh, they explained the entity that was keeping Carol in.
Yeah.
At that point, first off, the sequels, I encourage you to watch them because of how weird they are.
The third one seems the most interesting to me.
The third one is the most interesting because it feels like it's a different franchise. It feels like if you showed it to someone, I don't think they know it was a Poltergeist movie. It's so freaking weird. The second one feels more like they're all wrong. You know what I mean? They feel off. There's something weird about them. In a way where, especially in the 80s, horror sequels were all, Halloween, Friday the 13th. I can't say, with any of those big slasher franchises, I could go to, Friday the 13th 4 or Nightmare on Elm Street
11
3 or 4. Yeah, and it's they don't feel like a different right. They might not be as good as the first one, but they feel cohesive. The Poltergeist sequels feel like different movies, each one. The second one felt like they were trying to be like the first one, but just everything's weird. It gets into there's an Indian, Native American shaman. And the entity that apparently was the Beast in this movie was a creepy pedophile priest that was into Carol Ann. And then he's still the bad guy in the third movie, but it takes place in a skyscraper in New York.
The John Hancock Tower in Chicago.
It's so weird. I can't even honestly, as I said, I encourage you, maybe we'll review them in the future, but if you're interested, I encourage you to watch them just because
they're bonkers. It was what it sounds like.
It's the most bizarre franchise out of all the horror franchises. And to any of you listening, too, I encourage you, watch all 3 of them back to back, have a marathon, because it is a trip. It is a true rabbit hole of weird, like, what were they thinking kind
is
of
it
like.
is it like as unsettling as like when you just finished watching the masterpiece that is The Exorcist and you watch the trailer for The Exorcist 2 and you're like, what the hell is this? And it's like and the whole trailer is like played over like a funky dance beat and you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, actually, The Exorcist, the reason I wouldn't call the Exorcist franchise as weird as this one is because the third one kind of righted the ship. It's not exactly, like, it's still a good movie.
Yeah.
I would agree that one does feel like a different genre of movie, but yeah, like it's like the difference between Exorcist 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually a pretty good comparison, except they did it a third time and made it even weirder than the second one. Like, it is, as I said, I marathoned them. I went to, like, this was back before rental places were extinct. I went to, like, my local place and rented all 3 of them and watched them over the weekend, and I was just like, what the hell it's so weird. I can't even put words to it.
Yeah.
That's the real curse. But
the real curse is how bad 1, 2, and 3 are.
Well, and so Kane's one of the ones that died. I know you're going to get to Carol Ann. I forgot the actress's name, but
Heather O'Rourke.
She's the one that's kind of spooky to me because she just had this underlying heart condition that no one, including her, knew about, and she essentially just like died of like a heart attack or something randomly when she was like 12 years old. That to me is like really spooky. More so like, you sent me because you weren't sure I knew about the murder of the older sister's actress, but I did know about it. But I didn't know all the details, and that one wasn't spooky when I heard about it, and it wasn't spooky when you sent me the thing, because really it just kind of shows, like, she was just in a shitty situation.
Right.
Like, it doesn't really feel like a curse. It's more of, like, the people nowadays, there's much more of a dialogue about like child actors and the sort of like problematic people that they get involved with. And that's kind of because she was a child actor, like, she wasn't a big star, but she might have, if she hadn't been murdered by the guy, she might have been one of the big stars in the 90s or like even the 80s. Like, she was on her way to being like,
she'd actually
leading lady.
She had actually, Dominique Dunne had already, I think she'd signed on for a television series already that I think they remade in the last few years called V. She was supposed to be in that. But okay, so getting back to the list, so Julian Beck, who played Kane, and then we had Will Sampson, who played the shaman. He died
again.
During
it's like
a dual lung and heart surgery.
Again, this is why, like, it's the other, and I'm sure you probably already have this, like, the shaman in Kane, again, it's like, it's a different movie. And again, it might as well be a different franchise. Like, I feel like that's a stretch. Especially because, like, it's only like a couple of actors. The one detail that I've heard that's actually kind of spooky on top of Carol Ann's actress dying is the fact there was like a gun on set that was constantly getting loaded.
I did not hear anything about that, so I can't confirm
that was like a thing too. And it did go off. It didn't kill anybody, but like it would keep getting, it was supposed to be like a prop gun for something. I don't know why. There's no gun in the movie, but like there was a gun on set and it kept getting loaded.
Well,
everyone was like saying they weren't, but again, nowadays with the whole Rust thing going on, it's kind of like maybe someone was just not being responsible.
And then of course we had Heather O'Rourke, and she died actually during the filming of the third one. She had a bowel obstruction that led to septic shock.
That's what it was.
Which caused, she had 2 heart attacks in like 3 days. And then they found out she'd been having health issues for a long time, and no one could figure out what it is. And it was so sad because when I was watching the documentary, they had her mother, and everybody would talk about how great she was. They said that, that she wasn't a complainer, she did the work. And her mom's like, well, yeah, but if maybe she had complained like a normal person did, they could have diagnosed her sooner and she could have been saved.
That's really sad.
So that, I added a 5th on here because when they were filming the third movie, they had the building engineer for the John Hancock Tower on set for whatever reason. I forgot why they said he was there, but he just died on set. Like, he just stopped moving and he died on set. So I kind of threw him in there. But they said during Poltergeist 2, they said that and I don't know the plot, so I'm just going to describe it. They called it the cave set, was so dangerous. They said there was stuff falling all the time. There was problems with the film. They said that there was some scene that they had to do where somebody was throwing up, and it was some super gruesome scene and very taxing to do, and they filmed it, they wrapped it, they had the shot, and they came back the next day and they found out that the film had been blanked. And they don't know what happened to the film. They had to redo it. They were not happy about that. They were talking about the fogging occurring on some of the shots. They had a lot of problems with Poltergeist too. So they said William Sampson, who played the shaman, was a shaman in real life, a Native American shaman. So he came in at 4 a.m. and blessed the set, or did whatever he did. The director described it as he exorcised the set. They said after that they didn't have any problems. So that was,
and then the shaman died.
Yeah, and then he died. And then he died shortly after the film was done. And then, so this has basically all been tied to.
Sounds like the sequels were cursed, which right. I can tell you without any ghosts that they were cursed.
Well, they said people have said, and this is true. This has been confirmed that not part of it's been confirmed, but you'll see what I mean. That the films are cursed because they used real skeletons in the Fur movie.
I forgot about that.
So
God, you know what's funny is I've forgotten about that the other day when I was watching it, during the big spooky pool scene where all the bodies are coming out.
Yeah,
I was thinking, man. Good thing those are rubber skeletons. I'd heard the fun fact about them being real before. I forgot about it until just now. It's like, oh shit, no, God, how can you do that, man? That pool set's already pretty gnarly. I wouldn't have been necessarily afraid of getting electrocuted, but ugh.
Here's the thing: they didn't tell anybody. They found out after the fact. So they said they did it because acquiring real skeletons was cheaper than making rubber ones, which I'm sorry. Did the art director or whoever was in charge of getting the props, did they miss the point of the movie? The whole movie, they're experiencing all these problems because it was built on a graveyard. So yes, let's just desecrate them. I feel bad for whoever's. Go ahead.
You go.
Okay. No, I feel bad for whoever's grandmother got launched at the car when they're trying to drive away. Really? What is wrong with you people?
I'm more upset with whoever sold them the skeletons. On one hand, yeah, that's pretty crappy of the art director, but, when you're MGM's breathing down your neck about sticking to a budget, it's it kind of... Especially people usually donate their bodies to science for that kind of thing. So frankly, maybe if I decide to do that after I die, I'll put a note you may use my body for films.
I would love to be launched in someone's face.
If you make a Poltergeist remake, my skeleton is down, but it better not suck. Or else I will curse the film. No, but that just raises questions. I've heard. Now my mind is racing. I feel like I've heard stories about sketchy, underground kind of things for teacher skeletons and stuff, and that's kind of why nowadays most of it's with molds and stuff. But that really does raise the question again: who sold the film? Who sold it to them? Because that's who I'd be upset with. Why are you doing that?
That upsets me, but I just still can't get over the irony. It's that is the entire point of the movie.
Right?
This is what happens. So let's just mess with some dead bodies.
I think that's why that's such a famous fun fact, too. Again, I forgot about it this week when I was watching the movie, but I've heard that a bunch of times before. Oh, they were real skeletons. So the irony is not lost on people, because that is one of the most repeated fun facts about the movie, because it is ironic.
So my question is, when Steven was standing in the water, did he know? Is he just that okay being around bodies? Maybe there's something we don't know about him. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Who knows? Honestly, I bet he didn't. It makes me I feel like maybe the art director is the only one who knew. Who knows? That's actually a good question. Makes me wonder. Obviously, the cast didn't know because they said so. But yeah, that would be a fun question. Hey, did you know about that?
They talked about Poltergeist 3 had the worst problems. They said there was just a slew of accidents on Poltergeist 3. They talked about how the actress Zelda Rubinstein how her mother passed away during she found out about it, but basically essentially what's believed is the moment that she was doing promotional photos for the film. And so they all came out except for one. One of them has this weird apparition on it. And shortly after this is when she got the phone call that her mother had died. So there's been some talk about that photo was taken at the moment that her mother died. It's kind of weird. It's kind of one of those weird coincidences that makes you think. And there's also the fact that they did an explosion in the parking garage at I believe it was at the John Hancock Tower in Chicago, which you probably remember from the movie. And so, they had the explosion filmed. They had firemen standing by, to put it out immediately. But they said they filmed the scene, and then the firemen took off. They were too scared by the explosion. And they kind of just left it in there. And then they found out there was a maintenance worker who was still stuck in the garage, and the firemen wouldn't go in to get him. So the stunt guy had to go in and get this guy.
What's funny is I don't remember a lot about the third one other than it's weird. I didn't even know Zelda Rubinstein was in it. I figured because again, she's not really in the second one, so the fact they even brought her back for the third one was kind of weird. It's a weird movie. It somehow manages to be really unmemorable, but also I'm not surprised there were a lot of accidents. It has a weird vibe. It feels off when you're watching it.
Yeah.
The second one is just a bad sequel. They took the plot in some weird
directions. And they moved it to Arizona.
Exactly, which you can tell. You can immediately tell it's not in the same neighborhood. And then, yeah, it's such a weird franchise. It's totally a trip to marathon all three of them because they feel like they're different movies.
Well, to close off the curse, the last documented part of the curse is in 1994, which you should remember this. Maybe you won't because you were still too young. The Northridge earthquake. It says that, it did the neighborhood was affected by the earthquake, but the only house that sustained any damage was the Poltergeist house. Which I'm that's just kind of one of those weird, creepy coincidences that you're just huh?
There are creepy coincidences. Again, I don't think the film is cursed. Probably the franchise, but not the film. And there are some spooky coincidences, but a lot of the stuff that people say, ooh, it's again, with the actress being murdered, it's frankly, it had been going on for a while, before the movie even started filming. So it's just kind of an unfortunate, no one was looking out for her best interest kind of thing.
Right, but I think to the public it became a curse because all they just saw was this young, bright, and upcoming star suddenly just murdered.
Oh, for sure. That's and people weren't really talking. I mean, it's only recently there were even stalking laws imposed these days. No one really talked about it back then and stuff. So it's also a great way to sell the movie.
Right.
Oh my God, it's cursed. You'd better not see it. Maybe you'll get cursed too. That right. Makes people get their butts in seats. So I'm not surprised. I don't know. Some of it's spooky, some of it isn't. But what else did they say?
Okay, so they also said, so I wanted to circle back, because I said I was going to say why I don't think Julian Beck should even be on the list or be part of the curse, is because he basically had just a whole bunch, before he even got involved in the movie, a whole bunch of health problems, and essentially knew he was going to die, relatively soon. So I'm just that predates Poltergeist. That's not part. You can't even claim that's part of the curse. And the last thing I was gonna say about the curse is this is really sad. I forget what his name is, but the guy who directed the third one became close friends with Heather O'Rourke's mother. So Heather O'Rourke's mother asked him to be a pallbearer.
Oh God!
Which that must have just been just sad. But one fact I want to circle back to is. Don't know if you know this, but it probably would surprise you. When this first made its pass at the MPAA, they originally rated it R because this predates PG-13.
Yes, and this is one of the movies we talked about. Did we talk? I don't know if we've talked about any movies yet that were in that gray area. But this was one of them. Temple of Doom and this movie specifically were kind of what helped create PG-13.
Right.
Because Yeah, Temple of Doom's the other big one because it's like so it's not quite to the point of needing to be rated R, but it's definitely not for kids, you know, so it's
Well, you know what's interesting is they talked about nowadays I think it's hilarious because everybody's clamoring for that R rating. It's like your movie's not taken seriously if it's not R.
I mean, for Oscars, if you want your movie to make money, PG-13 is where you like sweet spot. All of the best high-grossing movies are always PG-13.
Well, they
usually for like serious, like I wouldn't say artistic, but like the ones that they want to win like Best Picture and stuff are usually R-rated.
Right. But I remember they said that they didn't want that they didn't want the R rating, which is you'd think horror movies they didn't want it because they said that was like the kiss of death for a movie because they wanted it to be a summer blockbuster, and the way it becomes a summer blockbuster is that kids go to the movies and see them again and again and again.
So kind of goes back to what I was saying because PG-13 didn't exist, so PG used to be the sweet spot. And if you think about Jaws should have probably been PG-13, but it didn't exist, but it was PG.
Yeah.
So I agree. And it kind of goes with what I was saying about this feeling like a family friendly. Like I think by today's standards this should be PG-13, but this is a lot of people's first horror movies. This is one of those movies that traumatized a lot of people when they were kids because they watched it because it's PG.
Right.
But I kind of agree with them saying that R would have been bad. Because frankly, think about it. If this had come out and was rated R, think of the crowd that would have gone to see it. You know? Like, they probably would have been like, this is baby stuff. You know? Like, they probably would have thought it was weak. Which is stupid. It's still a good movie, but I agree. This is like, again, this is why PG-13 exists for movies like this, where it's like you want that sweet money-making spot where you get families to go.
Right. Well, and I don't know if you caught this, but one of my favorite movies, The Silence of the Lambs, same font of the opening credits of Silence of the Lambs and the opening credits of Poltergeist, same font. I swear.
Didn't actually notice that.
I mean,
that's a cool detail, though.
That's the thing. Okay, so I wanted to close out this episode with something kind of different, but as you said, because this is the month of Halloween, and you mentioned that this is kind of the stuff I'm into. So after the movie is called Poltergeist, which I thought was weird because it didn't really seem like a poltergeist haunting. So, ya boy went to his reference books on the paranormal because I have those.
And I'm going to agree with you, but the reason it was because, I'm not as into it as you, but I know what a poltergeist is. There's no poltergeist in this movie. Like, you're about to explain what a poltergeist is, but honestly, I think the reason they called the movie that is it just sounded cool. And it's like there was no other name for, they needed something to stand out. And if they called it Haunted House or Ghost or something, like, it probably wouldn't have stood out as much as calling it, most average people in 1982 didn't know what the hell a poltergeist was.
Right. And
so they were probably going to be like, whoa, what is that?
Yeah. So really quick, listeners, I'm just going to pull, I went ahead and tabbed my book, which is things I wanted to make sure I mentioned. So there's some discussion about what a poltergeist is. Typically, according to parapsychologist William G. Roll, they are poltergeists, unlike a traditional haunting or demonic haunting, which is kind of more what I think was depicted in the movie, is usually focused on a particular person, and they usually occur only in the daytime, and there's a reason for that. They also talk about the fact that because it's a person-centered phenomenon, it's poltergeists are not noisy ghosts, like the German word is. Poltergeist stands for noisy ghost or noisy spirit, I believe. It's triggered within the minds and psyches of the living human agents. In other words, what appears to be the handiwork of restless spirit may actually be traced to the uncontrolled psychokinetic energy of living people. This in its events they refer to as recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK for short. And they said most reported cases of poltergeist probably can be accounted for by fraud, hallucination, or purely physical causes, but among modern parapsychologists, RSPK is by far the most widely accepted theory for alleged poltergeist activities that defy simpler explanations. They go on to say that most skeptics refer to poltergeist hauntings. They call it the naughty little girl theory, which is basically it's some kid who wants attention, so they do stuff, which is kind of what people think was the case in the Enfield haunting, which is what was depicted in The Conjuring 2. But they also believe that there's another psychological researcher named Harold Carrington added a biological element to what a poltergeist is. Writing in 1951, Carrington speculated that the onset of puberty in human beings, combined with other unknown factors, might serve to bring on poltergeist activity. In puberty, Carrington wrote, an energy seems to be radiated from the body. It would almost seem as though these energies, instead of taking their normal course, find this curious method of externalization. So, essentially, what the agreement is, even though there are still some people who disagree, what a poltergeist really is a person who's typically under a lot of stress or duress is able to, and they have to keep, either calm or do it or whatever they're doing. They're able to then have their stress and anger come out as psychokinetic energy and affect objects around them, throwing things around, sometimes even biting people and stuff like that. But I just I thought that was pretty interesting, and I wanted to clear that up for people because it is October and that is my thing, and I did pick the movie.
So what you're saying is that Carol Ann kidnapped herself.
Basically, Caroline
she went into the TV herself.
She was like, I am done with this basic family. I'm going to the other world.
But well, before my last thing, so you said you ended up not liking the movie. We've been talking a bit. Do you still feel that way? Is it just because of not feeling fulfilled by the investigative aspect of it? I mean, and again, the whole point of the house not being clean, quote unquote, was also kind of for that fake out right before the climax of the movie. Again, in screenwriting terms.
I know.
So I am do you still you said you're probably going to rewatch it? But I guess this kind of goes into our rating at the end. So yes. How do you feel exactly?
So I want to make clear, I do not hate this movie or dislike it. It's very, very difficult because I don't know. I do need to watch it again. There's just something about it that is missing for me that kind of just feels empty, and I'm still not sure what it is. Because, like I said, the acting and the special effects, and even just the basic story of the girl going into the spirit world and them having to take it back are just, very fascinating and very well done to me. But there's something about it that's interesting. I mean, that not interesting. That's empty to me, and I can't tell what it is. And at first I thought maybe it's because there wasn't really that much of a story there, or I don't know. But like you said, maybe if I try to watch it again and reframe it as an adventure movie instead of a investigative paranormal movie, I don't know. But it's not a bad movie. And it's one I do think everybody should, if this is their jam, if they like horror movies, I do think everybody should watch it because it is quite fun. And it is, what's funny to me is because, it's considered a horror classic and everything, which is so funny when you think of horror classics and you think of what movie classics are. Something about it just begs to be seen, in a theater in July, when it's 112 degrees outside in a dark theater with popcorn. And I kind of feel like maybe if I had seen it in that context the first time, I wouldn't have as much emptiness about it. I kind of rambled. Did any of that make any sense at all?
I think so. So how many out of 4 would you give it?
When I started, I was going to give it a 1 out of 4 pitchers of sweet tea.
My goodness.
But I decided when we were discussing and I looked back on how much work is put into it, legacy, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 2 out of 4.
That's fair. That's fair.
Because
that's a passing grade.
Yeah. If it had, I don't know, if it just had something else, and I don't know what it is. It would have been a 3 out of 4, but like I said, I don't know what it's missing, but there's something missing there. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, Siskel hated this movie.
That is interesting. That is interesting.
He gave it 1. He gave it 1 star.
You know what's weird? The part of the reason that's interesting is Ebert is the one who hated horror movies generally, so it's weird. If he had given it 1 star, I wouldn't have been surprised. But Siskel was the one generally like defending slasher movies, so that's actually kind of funny that he didn't like this one. For me, this is going to be a solid 3.5. Big surprise. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I don't think the effects have aged well always. Some of the effects have aged like wine. Mm-hmm. There are some that, as I said, are like amazing that it came out in 1982. But then there's others like the face peeling where you can like clearly tell it's like a dummy head and stuff. Yeah. Regardless, it'll still scare your kids. Highly recommend. This is a family flick. If you've never seen it because you're a Zoomer or something, check it out. It's available in a lot of places. I actually, partly because I've seen this so many times, I just went ahead. It was free on YouTube Movies. First time watching a movie on YouTube, and it wasn't horrible. This is one I like so much that it even works as like a TV movie. If you have cable and it's like on TV or something, It's a great thing to have. If it's your first time watching it, I'd say try and like be engaged and pay attention. But yeah, it's.
I would definitely recommend this to people. It's kind of like an intro to horror films.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. Again, this was a lot of people's first scary movie. Fun fact about me, my sister actually, so I had heard of this before seeing it because this was like on TV when my sister was on a trip with my mom, and she saw it when she was like 5. And she like told me all this horrible stuff. Like she told me about scenes, like verbatim what happened. And so I knew like not to watch it. And later on as like a family, we all saw it. And I kind of knew about the clown scene and all these other things because she'd seen it and like traumatized her. And the face peeling traumatized me because I didn't remember her telling me about that. And I was not ready for it when we saw it.
She didn't tell you on purpose. She wanted you to be traumatized.
Remember. I mean, that's
come
the thing,
on!
too.
How would that be the scene you don't remember?
She might have turned it off by the time the face peeling happened, or who knows? Like that's kind of the thing too. Is like she was like very young, like 5, so like you blank out. You know what I mean? Like imagine like a 5-year-old trying to tell you about their favorite movie. It's going to be like the most schizophrenic explanation you've ever heard in your life. Like talk to a 5-year-old. Like what happened in Spider-Man 3? What happened in what happened in Black Panther? Well, then the spaceship and it's not going to be most coherent.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to revise my score because you just made me think of something. And I'll tell you why. So I'm going to revise it to 2.5 pictures of sweet tea. And the reason is because when you were talking about scenes that traumatized you, that whole sequence when we had that one kid being eaten by the tree and that other girl left alone. That was so, even for me at this age, was disturbing because it was like it unlocked my inner child. And I was just like, oh my God, how would I feel if I was there? And I was just genuinely disturbed by
there's a lot of that.
By that whole sequence. And there's nothing really grotesque or anything happening, but just that kind of feeling of abandonment. I think
there's also just like a wide variety.
Well,
yeah, and there's like a wide variety of haunts in the film, so like it's bound to like get under most people's skin.
Something will.
Something like if gore doesn't bother you, then the face peeling isn't going to bother you. But maybe you were afraid of a tree as a kid, or maybe you were afraid of a clown, or getting sucked into like a hole in the closet, like. Or just like even just the idea of like a bunch of dead people floating around in your living room. Like there's a lot of different scary things in this movie, and even that like what you were talking about. Like I remember seeing this and just the idea of being stuck in like the ghost world after getting or that like everyone's rushing to help your sibling and then you are alone being targeted by this thing. Like there's a lot of that.
Yeah. Or
even just the fake out ending. Like the idea of you think the house is fine and then suddenly it's worse than ever.
Right.
But yeah, like so 2 out of 5, that's not too bad. But thank you, everyone, for listening in. We have been the TV people. No, we've been Whiskey and Sweet Tea. Hopefully, feel free to check out any of our older episodes. We definitely kind of name dropped a few of them in this episode. If you're watching or listening to this on YouTube, feel free to like, subscribe, all that jazz. But yeah, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We've been Whiskey and Sweet Tea, keeping it Kino.
One of these days, Whiskey will get that right and suck at Scorsese.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is produced by Alejandro Castillo, edited by Andy Reisfeld, and features original artwork by Ace Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks, and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.